Welcome to this week's edition of Leading the Way, powered by the Institute for Corporate Productivity. Influential people, high-performing organizations, creating a culture of success. And now your hosts, Scott Murray and Angel Carlton.
Hello again, everybody. Great to have you along on this Sunday afternoon. Scott Murray along with Angel Carlton, and yet another edition of Leading the Way as we talk to really some of the really most creative people and leaders that we have come to know. Major corporation CEOs from just about any place on the planet.
Yeah, those people that are really truly making a difference in business and entertainment and sports and music and
just about everything they're involved with.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And, of course, we do so with our wonderful partner, our productive partner. We're talking about I4CP, the Institute for Corporate Productivity, of which Angel is a director.
Also known as I4CP. We're a human capital research firm. We improve workforce productivity by studying the people practices of high-performing organizations, and we work with some of the top companies in the world like Amazon and Microsoft, AT&T, 3M, Starbucks, and we provide them with peer connections and resources so they can outperform their competition.
Yeah, and they do a great job. And, of course, we've got talk about great CEOs and people that really get it, have been incredibly successful in their young life, should we say, but it seems like just yesterday that I met Mark Cuban. That's right, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. He's the star of
Shark Tank.
That's right. I knew you wanted to say it.
Yep.
So let me tell you a little something about Mark before we bring him on. Since the age of 12, Mark has been a natural businessman. That really is an understatement. Selling garbage bags door to door, the seed was planted early on for what would eventually become a long-term success. And after graduating from IU, that's right, Indiana University, where he briefly owned the most popular bar in town, I love that, Mark moved to Dallas. And after a dispute with an employer who wanted him to clean instead of closing an important sale, Mark created his own company, Micro Solutions, a computer consulting service. And then, of course, he went on to later sell Micro Solutions in 1990 to CompuServe. And then in 1995, Mark and his long-time friend, Todd Wagner, came up with an internet-based solution to it did just about anything because they wanted to listen to Hoosier basketball games, and they're in Texas. And how do you do that? Well, that solution was something called broadcast.com.
You get real creative.
Oh, I tell you, he's something.
Yeah.
Streaming audio over the internet. Sounds simple today, but back then it wasn't so simple. But in just 4 short years, broadcast.com, it was then known as AudioNet, would be sold to Yahoo for $5.6 billion, billion with a B. And since his acquisition of the Dallas Mavericks back in 2000, he has overseen the Mavs competing in the NBA Finals for the first time in franchise history. Remember that one well, 2006. And then, of course, NBA World Champions in 2011. And they are currently listed as one of Forbes' most valuable sports franchises on the planet. That's good stuff. In addition to the Mavs, Mark is the chairman, CEO of Access TV, one of ABC's Sharks, as we mentioned, on the hit show Shark Tank, and an investor in an ever number of growing portfolios of businesses all across the country and around the world, for that matter. We'll have to see. I don't know if he's hit 100 yet, but it's got to be close to that. It's every time I turn around, somebody says, "Oh gosh, Mark Cuban's got a piece of that." I said, "You're kidding me."
Most people don't accomplish that in a lifetime.
You got that right. Well, he lives in Dallas with his wife and their 3 children, and he's one of the great guys and a great friend. And so delighted to say Happy New Year to Mark Cuban. How you doing?
Hey guys.
Welcome,
so
Mark.
You couldn't find a leading CEO, so you had to fill me in. Huh? And I appreciate that. You know, somebody's got to be the filler, and I'm happy to do it for you guys.
Well, I tell you what, we're delighted to have you on board because if anybody has really defined the term success in his lifetime, you have certainly done that. We have a little fun, Mark, with what we call our lightning round. There are 5 questions that just short little quick answers, but they kind of define who you are and what you're all about and how you got to where you are today. So if you want to whip through those, we'll see what you have to say. Now, I did say at the age of 12, you were a natural businessman because you're out selling garbage bags. And that's our first question, Mark. What was your first job, and really, what did you learn from it?
I was selling garbage bags door to door.
Okay.
I learned that if I put my mind to something, I could get past my fears of trying something for the first time. I learned that people will buy anything from a kid who smiles a lot. I learned that
I love it.
Everybody needs garbage bags, and I learned that sales is the core of any business. No business could succeed without sales, and that kind of gave me confidence for anything I did beyond that. And it really was a great foundation that my dad gave me by pushing me to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, the smile goes a long way for sure. Yep. All right, question number 2, Mark. Name the, say, top 2 mentors in your life, and how did they influence you?
I'd say I'm not a big mentors guy, believe it or not, but I'd say my dad. And my dad did upholstery on cars. Went to work every day. Just if you had a rip in your car seat or you had a convertible that had a top that had a rip in it, you took it to my dad. And he and my uncle worked together doing it. And he just, he was a blue collar worker that worked 6 days a week, 8-10 hours a day. And he never went to college, didn't really have an education, served in the military in World War II in Korea. And he just pushed me. I mean, not in a negative way, but just basically gave me the confidence. Like, I told the story of selling the garbage bags. He was like, Mark, I remember he would bring me to work, and he would have me sweep the floor of Regency Products where he worked. And he was like, I want you to do this because I never want you to do this when you're older. I want you to know what it's like to work and having a job that's physical so that you're motivated to go to college so you don't have to do what you and what I and your uncle do every single day. And he just always pushed me to never not so much not be afraid, but have the confidence that it's okay to fail, that I could bounce back, and that he wanted me to learn and he wanted me to go to college and just do things that he never did, and just that push to try to accomplish more than him. I'll be forever grateful.
That's interesting because it kind of leads into the third question in our lightning round here, Mark, and that is what has been the most significant experience, and it sounds like you had a great experience there in the relationship with your dad in developing your skills as the leader that you've become. Yeah,
I mean, there's no one single experience. It's just cumulative, all these little things that you learn over time. And I guess, if you had to line them up, one, fear of failing, being so afraid that I would fail, that I would work hard and try to outwork everybody else. Confidence that I could sell. Excitement that I love to learn anything and everything. If there was something that I thought could give me an edge, then if it meant spending 24 hours straight teaching myself, to program, or, I couldn't afford a computer. The first time I tried to buy a computer was a TRS-80 from Radio Shack, and my credit got turned down. And so I went and bought a $99 Texas Instrument, and I would sit there and teach myself how to program BASIC, and it was just fascinating. I wasn't really a computer or tech guy in college or high school, but once I sat down in front of it, it was kismet. It was just like, oh my goodness, I have an aptitude
right.
for this, and I like to do it. And so it wasn't unusual for me to just sit there and time would fly, and I'd be working 24 hours. And of course, living in the village in the 80s in Dallas, I put the skills to work. We would have parties at our apartment in the hill in the village, and I would write these little software programs that would welcome people to our party and ask for their name and get them to sign in. So while I was partying, I was also teaching myself how to program. So I always found two sides to that coin.
Wow.
I love that. It's a great story.
That's
I like that.
Great.
I like that.
Mixing business and pleasure.
Always.
Yeah, that's cool. And I like that you used, the example of fear as a motivator. And that's,
I've always been terrified of failing.
Yeah.
Always. Just because I'm so competitive, whether it's the Mavs or anything I try, I don't want to lose. And and so it just makes me work harder.
Mm-hmm. And he's talking about himself there, but I will, support that, because people will say to me, who's the most just driven person you've ever met? Name two or three. And one of the guys I always mention is Mark Cuban, because he is. He's just, oh my gosh, he's not going to be denied. It's whatever it takes, he's going to get it done.
Absolutely.
Not always, I've failed many times, but it always gets me a little bit closer.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, so, you've been a lot of places, you've done so many things. What is the best advice you'd give someone in the next generation, a young professional?
When I talk to somebody, recent college graduate, I tell them, don't stress. Smile a little bit more, because I think whether it was when the three of us were graduating from college or today or anywhere in between, we get so fearful, so stressed out about what's our future. What are we going to do? What are we going to be when we grow up? Who will we be when we grow up? And, at 20, 22, 24, you don't have to have those answers. Mm-hmm. I tell people, go out and get paid to learn. You paid to go to college, or now it's your turn to get paid to learn. You don't need the perfect job. I learned as much from my bad jobs as I did from my good jobs. And, just going out there and getting in the workforce, you find out who you are, you learn from your experiences. And so just don't stress. You don't have to have all the answers. Just go out there and see what comes along. And, and then when you find something that you're good at and that you love to do, put in the effort to try to be great at it, because that's where people are really successful. And it's not so much about how much money you make. It's how you face the day when you wake up every morning. If you wake up every morning and you're just so excited for the day, you're a success. When I was broke, when I had Micro Solutions and I was living 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, sleeping on the floor, I was loving life. I mean, I might have gained 30 pounds from eating mushrooms at bars because that's all I could afford. And I was a little bit miserable there, but I was having fun, and I was looking forward to every day. And, and I remember specifically, to this day, if there's a pretty day and the sky is blue, I'll just force myself just to look up and just appreciate the moment and just, take a deep breath and just absorb it all. And, that's something I started doing when I was as broke as a joke. I mean, literally, my first suits were 2 for $99 polyester that you wiped off, you didn't dry clean. There's a place in Dallas that's still here to this day called Rethreads that's up at Preston Forest area. Mm-hmm. And all my clothes, I mean, I would buy used fake polos, not used real polos. I couldn't afford those. Used fake polos, and they used to tear after 3 wears.
Oh gosh!
So I tell people, don't stress.
I love it.
It can't get a whole lot worse financially, and it'll only get better in every other way.
Yeah, the poster boy for fake polos, Mark Cuban.
Oh my goodness, that was me. You have no idea. Literally, one of my buddies. Who was it? Oh God, Blake, I think it was. It would import them from China at like $2 a piece, and then I would buy them, and then he was making money selling them to idiots like me, and it was amazing.
Oh, that's funny. All right, last question in the lightning round. Here we go. And my gosh, your legacy just continues and continues, and so much more to be accomplished, I know. But how would, at least at this point, Mark, would you define your legacy?
My kids. Of all the things that I've done, business and this and that, that's all fine and dandy. But the reality is, 100 years from now, no one will remember that stuff. What hopefully outlives me, my wife, and puts a smile on people's face and defines who I was, hopefully they'll say he was a great dad.
Great answer. You can't top that. I totally agree. Totally agree. I tell you what, I'm on the Father of the Year committee here in North Texas. One of these years, we're going to talk you into being a member. I've talked to you about that before. Don't say no. You're on the air. Oh. You've got to say yes. You know that. I just
don't take awards. I really,
I know you don't. I know you don't.
It's an interesting question because, I always feel like I'm just getting started, right? I haven't done what I need to do. And, when you start taking those kinds of awards, it's like you're done, right?
No, not true.
Done. He took this award. He took that award.
No, not true. You need that one. You really do. We're talking to Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Shark Tank star, you name it, he's done it. And we're going to be back with more of our conversation here on Leading the Way right after this brief timeout. At Leading the Way, we're all about hearing from influential leaders. So if you're a business leader interested in cutting-edge talent practices, then don't miss the annual I4CP conference coming up in March.
You'll get to meet influential leaders such as New York Times bestselling authors Brene Brown and Dan Pink, management professors Andrew Rizegi and Sidney Finkelstein, and executives from innovative companies like Accenture, Pinterest, Intel, and Booz Allen Hamilton.
The I4CP conference is annually ranked as one of the top HR and talent events, focused on next practices, the strategies and tactics that impact profit, but that few companies are using.
Designed for senior HR, talent, learning and diversity leaders, and closed to vendors and consultants, the conference offers superior thought leadership so you can better understand and address the critical people issues facing your organization.
Learn more today by signing up at i4cp.com/conference. That's i4cp.com/conference.
And now back to Leading the Way, powered by the Institute for Corporate Productivity. Here's Scott Murray and Angel Carlton.
Welcome back as we continue our conversation here on Leading the Way. Scott Murray along with Angel Carlton and our special guest today, Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, among other things. And, of course, as an entrepreneur with broadcast.com, the purchase of the NBA team and now Shark Tank as an investor, you've done so many things in your life, Mark. Let's go back to the early days. We talked about where it all came from, but if you were to look back, what is it that you're proudest of how you've been able to get from point A to point Z? I mean, or as you continue on, anything come to mind that really has stood out as being the key to in what you're most proud of and most successful with?
Oh my goodness, not really. I mean, like I'm not done. My kids are still growing up. I can look at financial successes and say, oh yeah, I made money here, or, I helped other people make money there. The Mavs winning a championship was obviously big, and I'm very proud of that.
Well, let me ask you this. Maybe this. Share with us the importance of a solid strategy in business and the execution of bringing that strategy to fruition. What would you say?
I mean, with anything else, there's a lot of great cliches. If you don't plan, you plan to fail. And the one of my favorites is the one thing in business that you can control is effort. There's so many things that are important when it comes to being successful in business. And I think as a leader in business, the first thing is vision. You've got to have a goal. You've got to have an understanding or a vision of where you see the company in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then having a vision is one thing, but then you have to be able to put in the time to define what steps you need to take to get there, and not just your own personal steps, but people that you work with, people that are vendors, people who anybody you've got that's a stakeholder. And then once you've identified the steps and the people, then you've got to be able to understand how those people, how their goals fit into your vision. Because if somebody doesn't believe in what you're trying to accomplish and doesn't buy in, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Yeah,
putting all those pieces together is what's critical, and to me those are the keys to success.
So did you have that vision initially when you started what became broadcast.com and executing that plan all the way to the exit plan?
Well, so let's start with Micro Solutions. When I just gotten fired and I started my own company, I remember sitting down and writing my marketing piece, right? And I remember first I had to come up with a name. And I wanted a 1-inch name. I wanted the name to be able to say exactly what we did. And we took the same approach with AudioNet, which was the precursor to broadcast.com. Micro Solutions meant we were using microcomputers to provide business solutions. And when I wrote that first Micro Solutions marketing piece, I remember the whole focus was our job was to make you more productive and more profitable, and to give you a competitive advantage. Those were our three pillars of that business, and everything we did at Micro Solutions was geared towards trying to accomplish that for our customers. And from there it got easy, right? Everything we did was, are we making our customers productive, profitable, and giving them an edge? And the answer was very binary, yes or no. At AudioNet, it was, okay, we know, or I believe, that streaming was going to be something really big, because we could analogize it to the cable TV industry. We were becoming digital in an era of analog, and that's when the big word was convergence. We were taking radio and television, things that were analog, and trying to convert them into digital and converge them into digital. But the problem was the technology wasn't really in place, and we had to believe in the fact that the technology would evolve to get where it needed to be, like where we see streaming today and it's mainstream. And so it was vision and belief that we were able to pull those two pieces together and get everybody to believe that not only could we stream, but we could do it in a way that would replace television and radio in some applications early, and then eventually and potentially totally. And so with that vision, that's kind of how we geared AudioNet and broadcast.com.
Oh, wow. Very cool story. Very cool. So I have a question about when you're investing in Shark Tank products. How much do you get involved with developing a business strategy for those
inventors?
I'll give you the whole backstory and forward story and the whole thing.
Okay.
So when they come on, we know nothing about them. And so they come on, and on TV, the deal is like 10, 12 minutes, maybe 15 for some pitches. In real life, when they're pitching to us, when we're shooting the show, it can go 60, 90, 120 minutes, and then they edit it down. That's why I get to look good, because it's great editing. But once we make a commitment, then we get to do due diligence. I'd say 30%, depending on the season, 40% will fall out because they got so excited during the pitch that maybe they embellished things and got a little excited about their numbers or something that was happening in their business, and it didn't match up. So then they'll fall out. And so from there, then once we close the deal, then yes. So what I ask for is weekly reports with bad news first. And so with the weekly reports, I get to see, because all these are operating businesses. They're not pure startups. They're typically not pre-revenue startups. They're operating businesses. So I want to know how they're operating and things that are happening. And we've learned a lot of that in due diligence. But I want the bad news first in their weekly reports, because I invested in them expecting good news. I like the idea. I liked what they're doing. I like the entrepreneur. And, my goal is to help them with the things that are so difficult that it's turned into a problem. And so that's where I try to focus. Then I've got about 10 people that work for me that will help them with the day-to-day things. Mm-hmm. And so I'll see what's happening on an ongoing basis. And then when there's strategic questions, strategic problems, opportunities, then obviously we'll talk about them, or I'll give them feedback, just depending on the entrepreneur and what their needs are.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, and so what kind of research do you do with these companies to identify the ideal customer for this new product?
Well, at that point in time, they typically have done their own, right? To get on Shark Tank, you already have sales, so you have a good understanding. Where we really get involved now is there's the catch, pull, and pull, and the give and take between online sales and brick and mortar sales, and doing it online on your own website or doing it through Amazon, Walmart, or other third-party e-commerce sites. And so where we tend to spend the most time is in helping our companies optimize their websites, helping them decide the best ways to use Amazon or Walmart or their own website, trying to determine the best ways to market, because it's really difficult these days. There's so many digital approaches and so many, on the margin things. Do you use traditional media? Do you use Amazon, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Pinterest, whatever it may be? There's so many options and ways to spend your money, but it's also becoming very data-driven now. Rather than trying to guess, you're able to try different things. Back in the day, we would say, okay, my gut feel is this will work from an advertising perspective, and then you pray the phone would ring, or you would pray that your sales on your website would go up. Now it's becoming very much data-driven and science-driven, and so we're trying to help even smaller companies apply science to making their advertising and promotional choices, and that's where we really get involved.
I don't want to embarrass you with what I'm about to say, but I mean, let's face it, Mark, you're a true rags to riches fairy tale. You talk about your dad, who's an automotive upholsterer of cars and what have you, never went to college, and yet you started with nothing and built the empire that you now have. So now you're investing in these young entrepreneurs that we get a chance to see weekly in Shark Tank. What do you see in them that maybe you see in yourself? In other words, as you look back, you talked about how you have fear factor and that type of thing, but I mean, you never give up. You're just not going to be denied. Are there other things that come to mind? All of a sudden you see some kid and you say, I like him. That makes me think of me.
Yeah, there are. I mean, look, one of the hard lessons I learned is you have to be very self-aware. You can't lie to yourself. I mean, I'm not the world's most organized person. I'm the exact opposite of anal. And so, you mentioned Todd Wagner. Another one of my partners in Micro Solutions was Martin Woodall. Both of those people are detail-oriented and anal. I mean, literally, OCD every step of the way. And I don't mean that in a disability manner. Just they're very attention-oriented and process detail-oriented, which is the exact opposite of me. And so when I see an entrepreneur that recognizes their strengths and weaknesses and hires or partners with people who complement them, I like that when I see myself in them. When I see somebody who's a salesperson, somebody who understands that to be successful as a salesperson for your company, it's not about convincing people that you should buy something maybe against their wishes or against their interests, but selling really is about putting yourself in the shoes of your potential customer and helping them understand why your product can help them, and also being able to recognize that if your product can't help them, it's okay to say no. We're not a fit, because that customer, business ends up being a small world over time, and the people that you try to sell to, if you've misled them, when they go to their next company, you're not going to have any shot. And as people move up the ladder, chances are they're going to go to a bigger and more important company. And so when you're able to help people through the sales process, that's what I look for, and I think that's part of me that I see in a great entrepreneur.
Now, that makes sense. Let's go from Shark Tank to the Dallas Mavericks. We've got to take a break here shortly, but before we do that, people claim to enjoy working for you. I know a lot of people that work for you, and they say, Mark's great. He's crazy, but he's great. They enjoy being around you. So how would you describe your leadership style that makes people respond in such a positive way, and maybe the type of culture that you've created and how important it is for you to continue that?
Oh, boy. It really depends, right? So when I first got started, the Micro Solutions days, the Broadcast.com days / AudioNet days, I would say I was more of a micromanager, just like, here's what I need to get done. I'm going to stay on you to get it done. And probably back then, when I was in my 20s and early 30s in particular, I was a little bit more high-strung, I would say. And so I would push people. But as I got older, I recognized that that's not necessarily the best way to get things done. So by the time I got to the Mavericks, it was just about winning, and I wasn't looking to be a day-to-day operator. So whether it was Tradema Ussery or Donnie Nelson or now Floyd Yonner, pretty much just let them do their job and give them guidance and try to make it so that we respect people who work for us. We recognize that family comes first. We recognize that, the Mavs are an experienced business where people come to have fun, and we try to make every game a fun experience for our customers. And obviously, we want to win. And so, work gets fun when your boss says, I'm less interested in how much money I spend than I am in how many games I win. And so that I think makes it a little bit more fun for everybody too. But yeah, in terms of my style today, with the Mavs in particular, I'd say I'm more hands-off on a day-to-day basis. I'll help from a sales perspective. I'll help from a strategic perspective. But I tend to let people do their job.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I love the Mavs and going to the games. It's so much fun. And you mentioned earlier self-awareness being one of the things that you kind of see in other people that you may recognize in yourself. From a talent perspective, what type of person do you look for to be a good match for your organizations? And how important is it that they align with your business strategy, the culture?
Well, so two pieces here. One, at this point in time, I've learned that I'm not the best at hiring people. In my experiences, salespeople are the worst people at hiring because they like to sell and they like to be sold. And as a salesperson at heart, I did all the hiring in my first company. I did most of the hiring, not most, but let's say a third of the hiring at AudioNet and AudionetBroadcast.com, and a minimal amount of hiring with the Mavs. I mean, maybe in the early days, I brought some people I trusted in, and then I let them do their job. So I've learned a lot along the way that I'm not the greatest at hiring and making those personnel decisions. So I typically defer to people who I think are a lot better at it.
I'll tell you what, we're talking to Mark Cuban. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more with Leading the Way right after this. At Leading the Way, we're all about hearing from influential leaders. So if you're a business leader interested in cutting-edge talent practices, then don't miss the annual I4CP conference coming up in March.
You'll get to meet influential leaders such as New York Times bestselling authors Brene Brown and Dan Pink, management professors Andrew Rozagi and Sidney Finkelstein, and executives from innovative companies like Accenture, Pinterest, Intel, and Booz Allen Hamilton.
The I4CP conference is annually ranked as one of the top HR and talent events focused on next practices, the strategies and tactics that impact profit, but that few companies are using.
Designed for senior HR, talent, learning and diversity leaders, and closed to vendors and consultants, the conference offers superior networking and thought leadership so you can better understand and address the critical people issues facing your organization.
Learn more today by signing up at i4cp.com/conference. That's i4cp.com/conference.
And now back to Scott Murray and Angel Carlton and Leading the Way, powered by the Institute for Corporate Productivity.
Welcome back to Leading the Way. Scott and Angel along with the one and only Mark Cuban, owner of the Dallas Mavericks, and of course Shark Tank extraordinaire, and he says he likes doing it, and we like watching it each and every week, and we learn so much about entrepreneurism, and I mean the list goes on. And today we're talking about leadership and what have you. Take it away.
Yeah, and we're talking about strategy, and I'm curious to know how do you go about acquiring players for the Mavs? I mean, what's the strategy behind that?
Oh my goodness! Well, first, identifying talent. So there's free agency, where we haven't been as good at that as we have liked to have been, but there's 30 teams trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't beat yourself up. The other 29 teams having the same problem.
Yeah, we all have the same challenges. Some, teams. Here, let me take a step back. Teams go through life cycles, and because players can't play forever. As much as it seems like Dirk's going to play forever, he's not this year, but probably next year will be his last year, and his abilities decline over time like everybody else's, and he'll be the first to tell you that. His bones hurt a lot more today than they did 15 years ago. And so during Dirk's prime, we took one approach, where I was willing to spend any amount of money, and we would make trades where we would, take players that maybe cost us a lot of money or wouldn't be great for the team, but by taking a bad player or expensive player, we were able to get the player we needed to help us push forward to get to our goals. And so, we did that in 2006, and we ended up with Jerry Stackhouse in a deal with the Washington Wizards. And then again, we did a deal with the Wizards when we got Caron Butler and Brendan Haywood, which, helped us get to the finals. And we did a deal to get Tyson Chandler, which helped us get to the finals. So in our life cycle, and I think businesses are the same way, you have to recognize where you are in the life cycle of the company. Are you a pre-revenue startup? Are you just getting started? Are you growing from 5 people to 10 people to 25 people? Are your sales, 5,000 or 100,000 or 10 million? Each step of the way, there's a different set of challenges, and it's the same with the Mavericks. Right now we're rebuilding. We're trying to add good young talent, and there's only a few ways to do that. We got Dennis Smith Jr. in the draft this past year. We think he's going to be phenomenal, but now we're taking our lickings, because when you have a rookie point guard, he's going to have his ups and downs. We have Harrison Barnes, we have Seth Curry. We've got a good young group, Yogi Ferrell, etc., that we think are going to stay with us for the rest of the year. But we need another star or two. And so this year, possibly through the draft, possibly through free agency, we're going to go out there and try to get those missing pieces and see if it gets us back to the finals as quickly as possible. But that's where we are in our life cycle. We're rebuilding, and businesses have to be honest with themselves and self-aware as well. You've got to know where you are in your life cycle. Lots of companies, particularly service companies, early on, they kind of have to talk the talk, but they can't necessarily walk the walk. So they'll try to look bigger. They'll try to act bigger than they really are, and that's okay. But you still get to get the job done. And so, it's never easy, but you just go out there and try to prepare and do the best you can.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like
great
that.
advice.
Yes.
Great advice, and so many parallels between the sports world and the business world.
Yes,
just as you're speaking.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you, Mark, what's the best part about being Mark Cuban? I mean, what is your secret sauce that?
Oh my goodness. The best part of my day was when my kids call me Dad. Believe it or not, that just just hearing that word, Dad or Daddy, that just makes my day every time. Beyond family, just a challenge, just the competitive juices, just trying to stay keep up with everything. In the technology world in particular, there's so much happening with artificial intelligence and within that neural networks and machine learning, all these different elements, and it's brand new pretty much to everybody. And there's nanotechnology, and so being able to keep up with these new technologies is not easy. It's very time consuming, and it's a challenge. But I know if I'm able to put in the time to do that, then I'm going to be in a position to make smart investments, partner with smart people, and also implement new technologies or suggest new technologies that give my companies an advantage. And just the challenge, typically when people think of new technology, they think it's the domain of kids coming out of college, and that's just not necessarily the case. I'm going to be 60 years old, and I'm going to be able to keep up with every one of those guys or women coming out, and that's my goal. I'm like, I don't care if you're 19, 20, 21, 22, if you want to go to battle with me in business in a tech war, I'll kick your ass. Excuse my French. And so that motivates me, and that gets me excited, and just a lifelong desire to learn. I think that keeps me up to speed and fresh and excited and relevant. To be candid, I mean, your companies can't compete if you don't know what they need or you don't understand the elements that they need. And so my goal is to be able to keep up.
Well, I tell you what, you do it well. You're the captain of what I call thinking out of the box. You do that well. And when you talk about all the things you've shared with us today, I've got a couple of questions, and then Angel and I are going to have to wrap it up. But I do want to know, nobody talks about you being the philanthropist that you are as well. And you're so friendly and you're so generous with organizations, and a lot of people don't hear about it. So thank you for all you do from a philanthropic standpoint as well. We really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Yeah, I mean, I try to help where I can, and honestly, I'm not the guy that just says, okay, let me write a big check to a big organization and get recognized. I'm probably the exact opposite. My philanthropy tends to be, all right, somebody's in need. I'll get an email or somebody will refer somebody to me, and let me bail them out. Or somebody needs an operation, let me pay for the operation. Somebody needs to get from somebody buried or point A to point B.
But the things we never hear about, though, Mark.
Yeah, and that's by design, right? I try to do it for the right reason, and it upsets some charities and some organizations because they're like, look, we want to say Mark Cuban contributed, and I'm like, no, Mark Cuban doesn't want that. And so there's a lot more I probably could do, but I just try to be as supportive of people that need it as I can, and also the city of Dallas. I think that's probably the one place where it's a little bit more public because Dallas has done so much for me, and wherever I can possibly help, that's what I'm going to do.
Yep. Absolutely. And you talk about helping, and we're going to wrap this up here, but you and I did an event for a lot of people involved in the corporate world, business success, leadership secrets. You shared everything possible. And we were about, 3,000 people at the convention center 3 months ago. And I asked you at that time, all that you do and all the wisdom that you have, we have a president of the United States right now that's a billionaire, was very successful in business. My gosh, Mark Cuban is alongside in much the same breath. And I asked you at that time if you would ever like to become president of the United States. And what would you do if you were president of that type of thing? So I just first of all, does that appeal to you? Because I can see a lot of people would say, "Oh man, I'd vote for Mark Cuban. I mean, he's a go-getter. He's going to make it happen. He's going to do this."
Is it my dream job? No. Just out of the patriotic side of me, the part that really appreciates this country and loves this country, that's the part of me that says, well, if it's a job that needs to be done and, I can get to that point, because politics isn't just about who's best for the job. There's so many people that are more qualified than any, in any generation, whoever the presidents are, there are always people who are going to be more qualified.
Good point.
But they may not be as electable, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not just a question of are you the most qualified, are you most capable, but it's a combination of qualified, capable, and electable. And in this day and age, I'm not here to tell you I'd be the most capable, most qualified candidate. There'll certainly be better qualified, better capable. But when you add in the variable of electable, in this day and age, my value pops up, and so it'll depend whether or not I would run would depend on what happens in the midterms. If there's a Democratic resurgence and they recapture control of the House and the Senate, then there's no need for me, right?
Right.
The system will work and take over. If the Republicans get stronger, then maybe there is a need for somebody, because I think we're missing leadership. Look, not to get too political, it's public that I'm not a fan of our current president, but
right.
If you just hit the mute button and ignore everything he says and just look at policy things, well, he's going to be like any other president in our lifetime. There's going to be things you agree with and things you disagree with. There's going to be things you vehemently agree with, and there's going to be things you vehemently disagree with. The challenge is you can't, for any leader, you can't just hit the mute button. Leadership is how you communicate, and I think that's what's missing. And so I think that's an area that I can solve. Where I wouldn't be somebody who played to a base. I probably run as an independent because I think people are sick of parties now. I think we've become so tribal and so partisan that people are looking for a third option, because it's not about we spent this whole hour talking effectively about how do you solve problems, and nothing we're doing in government right now is about solving problems and being inclusive and respecting and leading people, and that's part of the problem.
We're trying to unify, not create more separation.
Well, exactly.
So I love that.
Yeah, and that's what's not happening right now, because when it's all said and done, there's no president that's going to make everybody happy. There's no CEO that's going to make every employee happy, that's going to make every customer happy. We all have to compromise at some level. And maybe compromise isn't the right word. Maybe it's recognize that no scenario is ever going to be 100% perfect the way we love it, but that's the way life is. But in order to be able to feel good about our lives and feel good about every day, you want to know that there's somebody that you work for, somebody that is president that at least recognizes and respects everybody. Because when you don't show respect for everybody, you don't recognize everybody as being, a real person, then that's when you start to see the fissures. That's when you start to see the cracks, and that leads to social unrest. And, there's nothing more expensive mentally, physically, and financially to a country than social unrest and social upheaval. And, we're not there yet, and I just hope we don't get there. But not having the right leadership opens that door.
Mark, I can't thank you enough.
You got my vote.
Great wisdom, huh? Great wisdom. There you go. I can't thank you enough for stopping by. The two of us have just been, as I told Angel at the top, wait till you hear what Mark has to say. Doesn't matter what question you ask him, he'll have some great wisdom to share with us. And
I appreciate that, Scott. Thanks for
really
being a friend, and I appreciate everything you've done for me over the years.
I'll tell you what, I remember the time I walked into your house, this beautiful house that you had just bought after you purchased the Mavericks, and I was over there to interview as a sports anchor. And I walked in, and your living room was the size of a basketball court.
Yes,
and I tell you what, you had two pieces of furniture. You had two couches over in one corner with a big screen TV. And I said, "Is that where you spend all your time?" I said, "That's it." We could have played football in the rest of the living room.
Trust me, before I got married, I had friends over, and that's exactly what we did.
Well, it was unbelievable. And then we walked back to the foyer area in front as you said goodbye, and we shook hands, and I said, "Good luck and welcome aboard." And you said, "This is unreal." And I said, "It is a dream come true." And you told me about where you came from and how you grew up. And then I said, "This place is incredible." And you said, "This foyer area is the size of the house I grew up in Pittsburgh."
Yeah, wow.
And so
true.
Nothing more to say on top of that. Mark Cuban, thank you
Appreciate
much.
it, guys.
See you down
Mark.
the road. Good man, great friend. And we'll be back with more in our Insight segment right after this. At Leading the Way, we're all about hearing from influential leaders. So if you're a business leader interested in cutting-edge talent practices, then don't miss the annual I4CP conference coming up in March.
You'll get to meet influential leaders such as New York Times bestselling authors Brene Brown and Dan Pink, management professors Andrew Rizegi and Sidney Finkelstein, and executives from innovative companies like Accenture, Pinterest, Intel, and Booz Allen Hamilton.
The I4CP conference is annually ranked as one of the top HR and talent events focused on next practices, the strategies and tactics that impact profit, but that few companies are using.
Designed for senior HR, talent, learning and diversity leaders, and closed to vendors and consultants, the conference offers superior networking and thought leadership so you can better understand and address the critical people issues facing your organization.
Learn more today by signing up at i4cp.com/conference. That's i4cp.com/conference.
Welcome back to Leading the Way. Here are your hosts, Scott Murray and Angel Carlton.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Angel Carlton here with Scott Murray. We have been talking with Mark Cuban, Shark Tank investor and Dallas Mavericks owner. It is now time for our I4CP Insight segment with the CEO of the Institute for Corporate Productivity, Kevin Oakes.
Hello, Kevin. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Scott. And Angel, I think you should have also added perhaps future president of the United States.
Right. Yes.
That's a pretty good comment he had, wasn't it?
That was great. That was fantastic.
Well, I tell you what.
He has my vote as well.
He gets your vote, too. All right. I tell you what. When we heard what Mark had to say at the very beginning of the interview, Kevin, he talked about the fact that he was 12 years old when he was an entrepreneur in the beginning and all that he sold and what he did. Then he goes on to IU, to Indiana, and creates broadcast.com, sells that to Yahoo for over $5 billion, with a B, $5 billion, buys the Dallas Mavericks, now appears on Shark Tank Weekly on network television. So if you were to put together a top 10 of things that you were most intrigued or impressed by what Mark just had to say, what would be your top 2 things on that list?
Well, he said a lot of things, but I was taking some notes as he was talking, Scott, and a few things that I wrote down. One of the first things he said was talking about fear of failure and using that as a motivator.
Right.
And I've always felt that as well. I just think that's such a great motivator for every entrepreneur. It goes back to Andy Grove of Intel's old saying that, only the paranoid survive. And so I do think that's a big motivator for entrepreneurs. But I also think, frankly, it's a motivator for a lot of companies today. We're seeing large companies get disrupted by startups that, didn't exist a few years ago, that weren't even on their radar. And so I think a lot of large companies are trying to instill that sort of fear of failure mentality in their workforces as well. But another one that I wrote down was don't stress. And I love that one, too. I've always personally tried to maintain calm under pressure, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. But yeah, I think his comment around don't stress really it leads you back to perseverance, and I think folks who are entrepreneurs, they persevere through good and bad, and they don't stress the small stuff that happens along the way. And I thought those were great points that he made early on in the interview.
Yeah, totally agree. Good, 2 great ideas.
Well, Kevin, you're an entrepreneur yourself. You acquired HRI, which has now become I4CP. What similarities do you hear between Mark that you can see in yourself?
Well, I guess I just alluded to a couple of them, but it's funny. When I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do in college, or what career I wanted to pursue. And my dad had me take a few different tests. And one of the results of the test was they said, hey, you might be a good entrepreneur someday. And I remember at the time asking my dad, what the heck does that word mean? Because I had no idea. But as I look back at it, I think he's, on Shark Tank and just in his own investing, doing a lot of the things that you need to do when you're looking at companies. And that's, investing first and foremost in the management team. There's going to be bumps along the road. You want to know that the people who are running the organization are going to be able to figure those out. Sometimes they're going to have to do complete pivots from the original business model, and so you want to, make sure that you're backing them quite well. So I thought that was a good lesson that he had early on. I've actually tried to have my son watch Shark Tank as much as possible so he can learn some of those lessons along the way. I also loved what he said around broke as a joke. I can remember personally being in my spare bedroom trying to start up my first company, nobody to talk to all day. It can be quite lonely, and you're pretty broke at the time, right?
Right.
So it's it's something I think a lot of people go through, and I think it humbles you. And clearly, the one thing I took away from that interview is Mark is a very, very humble guy, contrary to what I think a lot of people think of him, and who don't really read about him or listen to him.
Well, a lot of people, they just see him on the side. If they're at a basketball game, they see him standing up there in a Mavericks T-shirt shirt or whatever, because he's never wearing a suit or anything, yelling at the referees. And you're right. You're absolutely right, Kevin. That's what they see.
He is. He's a regular guy, just like the rest of us. It's pretty refreshing, actually, to see that. So going back to what we were talking about, are there certain types of companies that you have invested in as you've become an entrepreneur and that you've gotten involved with?
Well, I sit on several boards today, and I have made some investments along the way. And generally, I like most investors are looking for those disruptors. Those organizations that can shake things up. Maybe it's a staid industry or a staid market, and they've got a new take on it. And we see that more and more today. But I think that's what really attracts many people to certain organizations. But then going back to my management team comment earlier, I think you really got to have faith in that team and in that leader that they can figure things out along the way. As I'm looking out at organizations, that's definitely an aspect that I'm looking for.
One of the things, Kevin, that Mark said is teams, like companies, go through what he called life cycles. So he shared a lot about strategy, the importance of starting with a vision, creating that plan, taking steps towards execution. This is easier said than done, obviously. Otherwise, everyone and their brother would be the next Mark Cuban. But here's my question. How does one begin with the end in mind strategy? How does that correlate with the research that maybe you've done at I4CP?
One of my favorite people to quote of all time is Peter Drucker, who, obviously was one of the best management gurus that, we've seen in our lifetimes. And he had a great quote that strategy is a commodity and execution is an art. And I always like that one because you never hear about great strategies unless they're executed well. There's great strategies that are concocted all the time, but the execution fails, and and we move on. And so I think what Mark talked about a lot was having that sound vision to begin with. And it was interesting that for his own companies, he kept that very simple. And that was one thing I noted, that he just really tried to have a very concise, simple way of thinking of things that his employees could use as a filter. And I think that's important. As you go through your day-to-day exercises, most high-performing organizations, they need their employees to have that filter around, is it aligned with the strategy of the organization? And we talk a lot about strategic alignment in our research. But it does all kind of boil down to execution. And some of the best companies out there, they organize themselves to execute as effectively as possible. I always love the companies that organize themselves around the customer and try to make it as easy to do business with the organization as possible. And we've all had, situations, I'm sure, Scott, where like the company we're working with is trying to make us jump through as many hoops as they possibly can, as opposed to making it easy to do business with them. Those are the organizations, I think, that succeed, that make it as easy to do business with them as possible.
Yeah, Mark spoke a little bit about self-awareness as one of his strengths and key factors for his success. Today, we hear a lot about the growing popularity in the workplace, and they're using mindfulness as the buzzword. What are high-performing organizations doing to create a more awareness or mindfulness in the workplace?
Yeah, mindfulness is big and continuing to get bigger, and many companies are teaching mindfulness inside the organization, or giving their employees the leeway to go to mindfulness classes or seek out content. And I do think it's important. You want an organization that is not going to stress, is not going to sweat the small stuff, that does have some good self-reflection and self-awareness. And I think mindfulness has been a really good movement inside of corporations to be able to enable that with the organization itself. It really builds into the research we've done around organizational agility, Angel, And I think, many organizations, they're trying to be as agile as possible so that they can get around those disruptors that are, lurking on the horizon.
Continued wisdom on your part. It's always great. I4CP CEO Kevin Oakes.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Angel.
Thanks, Kevin.
Until next week, I'm Scott Murray.
And I'm Angel Carlton.
Don't forget to live your legacy by leading the way. Thanks. So long, everybody.